Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mayank Patel, one of the charter holders volunteering for this webinar. I welcome you all for participating in this webinar. Today's webinar is about opportunities and challenges for social impact startups in these trying times. We have today with us Mr. Mukesh Sharma, CFA, as the expert speaker. Mukesh is a co-founder of Mentera, a venture capital fund platform that addresses the biggest issues facing agriculture, healthcare, and education in India through private placements that target commercial returns and big sectoral impact. Over the last 18 years, Mukesh has invested in and has worked on deals in several emerging and frontier markets. He has raised capital from diverse set of investors. Earlier, he was the chief investment officer at Willgrow, India's oldest and foremost social enterprise incubator. Mukesh has played an integral role in developing first generation companies through the valley of death. He believes that non-linear outcomes are more likely to be achieved through big game changing ideas that leverage the latest science and technology. Mukesh has advised the promoters and board of several companies. He has been a non-executive director on the board of Biosense Technologies, Omics Labs, Eduo Diagnostics, and Concept Learning. Mukesh has participated in activities of Impact Investors Council India. He is also a member of Polestar Awards jury focused on celebrating excellence in journalism and delivering social impact. Mukesh, I welcome you for this webinar.
Thank you, Mayank. Nice to be here, and I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation here, where I'll share my experiences and learn from all of you about how you look at impact as well. Thank you, Mayank.
Welcome again. Let us talk about the background to impact investing and its relevance for financial markets and our members. Mukesh, can you throw some light on how is impact investing different from mainstream investing?
Sure. So I think, like most of you, I worked in mainstream financial markets, venture capital, private equity, where generating returns was our primary goal, and we looked at just maximizing returns for our shareholders, for our investors. So I think what is very important is to first define impact, also look at the historical context and current reality before we talk about social impact investing, mainstream investing. What is the difference between the two? It's very important to look at the context. So many great thinkers and leaders over the centuries have always declared that men are created equal, all men are created equal. But the fact is that all people are not created equal, and they don't live and die as equals. Our social, political, economic structures, they sustain, reinforce and increase the inequality around us. While the economic poverty is very visible, we don't always realize that the poor countries and people suffer the most from climate change. They've contributed the least, but they suffer the most. And the current pandemic is a great example of this irony. The poor had no role in triggering or spreading the virus, but they will pay a disproportionate economic cost for this pandemic. And we see this theme playing out consistently. Pandemic, no pandemic, this happens. And then there is gender inequality. So Melinda Gates is right when she says that no matter where in the world you are born, your life will be harder if you are born a girl. So access to skills, knowledge, ownership of business and assets, pay parity, participation in decision making, we will find gender discrimination at all levels of social and economic strata. So there's opportunities for creating impact for equality everywhere. So with that context, if we look at inequality, at Mentera, we reject this inequality. We refuse to concede to this normal that we have been used to for decades and centuries. That is at the genesis of Mentera. And we believe that with sufficient innovation, disciplined execution, market returns can be delivered. Because when I started looking at impact, most of the times I also came from that viewpoint saying, my fiduciary duty is to the investors and I need to generate returns for them, and trying to create impact, I might not be able to deliver returns. But I think that's a lazy argument. I don't think I understood it enough, and many participants in the markets, it's a good question. It's a reasonable question, but I think the opportunity exists for addressing it. After working in impact for a long time, what I see, Mayank, is that the markets are currently not even pricing impact. Our underwriting and investing models do not factor it in. Our clients are demanding impact, and as an industry, we will need to better align with the current very narrow definition of fiduciary duty that we have. And investing models, therefore, will need to be significantly re-engineered to optimize for social and environmental impact alongside the financial returns. Now, directly addressing your question, you asked, what is the difference between mainstream investing and impact investing? Uh, Very little. We all invest in private businesses, right? We all invest in startups. We all invest in private businesses. But that is where the answer to that question comes from. What kind of businesses do we invest in? Would you call the large cab aggregator or a telecom company an impact enterprise? And would you consider their investors impact investors? Well, in a way, they provide essential services and address a big gap in the market. So they are creating a massive impact. But is their most important objective increasing the driver's income? I don't think so. They collect instant cash from the riders, but they don't put it in the driver's account immediately. Many times you would take an Uber or a Ola ride where the driver will say, "Are you going to pay me in cash?" Because he's not getting money at the same time as you paying it. So the well-being of the driver, the concerns of the driver, the challenges of the driver is not central to that enterprise's mission. And that is why I wouldn't call it impact. Large telecom companies are not focused on providing best possible connectivity to poorest citizens at the lowest price. At times, these results are achieved incidentally, but that's not their core. So that's definitely not impact. So what is impact? If you look at Amul Dairy Cooperative, it's one of the best names that we have heard. Whether you look at milk, butter, cheese, paneer, I think all of us have lived consuming Amul products. Who owns Amul? The dairy farmers own Amul. They get more than 60 to 70% of the price that the end consumer pays. The quality of the product is very good. It compares better than anything that you would see from any other dairy. In healthcare, we have examples like Arvind Eye Hospital that is operated with tremendous clinical and financial results, despite providing free surgeries to almost 50% of patients. If you look at microfinance, Grameen Bank, 9 million poor borrowers, the quality of their book is better than most banks with the richest clientele in our country. If you look at their NPA ratio is lower than the best Indian banks. So tremendous impact, good financial discipline, returns, all of it is possible. So once we define what kind of companies we are funding, then let's start looking at what is impact investing. Many of you would have heard about terms like double bottom line, triple bottom line, ESG, SDG, responsible investing, impact investing. That's where, once you start putting all of them in the same bracket, that's where confusion starts. So Global Impact Investors Network has defined impact investing with 3 very important attributes. They've done 4, but I consider three to be more important. First is the impact intentionality. That makes it different from ESG and responsible investing, that at the time of making an investment, the intention of that impact, making it core to that organization, core to that investment underwriting is important. So that intentionality is the first attribute. Second attribute is financial returns. Where you see need, Where you see a big problem, where you see big issue around poverty, you have scope for philanthropy. Where you see returns, you have an opportunity for investing. So if the returns are not there, it is not investing. Then it is philanthropy, it is a charity. And this whole continuum from below market returns to risk adjusted market returns, each fund has its own definition of impact, but return is an important attribute to impact investing. Third is measurement. You can't deliver something that you're not measuring. And many companies and investors, intentionally or unintentionally, end up relabeling the existing business activity to meet a very low bar, which is making it very important to define and measure that impact. So if you are intentional about it, if you are targeting returns, and if you are measuring impact also, then I would say you are closer to impact investing, and that's the definition for impact. I'll pause here and back to you, Mayank.
Yep. Mukesh, you have touched upon the difference between a charity and a social enterprise in your response just now. But can you also give some idea about what differentiates profit-oriented commercial enterprise from a social enterprise?
So let me start giving you a few examples. One of the companies that we funded, it's called Biosense Technologies. It is a company which has created, you know, several devices, non-invasive hemoglobin measurement device, India's first glucometer. You could pass it on as a regular business. The margins are good, profits are good, products best in the world in terms of accuracy, in terms of how it works. If you remember in earlier times, you know, if you would visit a doctor, doctor would look at your eye and probably shine a torch. Doctor was trying to estimate hemoglobin level. And what this company did is they created an algorithm. They created a device which is connected to the phone. With that algorithm, once a picture is taken, it automatically estimates the hemoglobin level. How did this enterprise start? So both the founders of Biosense went into rural parts of the country. They saw tremendous amount of malnutrition in districts like Palghar, which is, few hours, probably 2 to 3 hours driving distance from Mumbai. And that is where you see largest incidence of, newborn deaths so close to the commercial capital of the country. And they were perplexed with it. They were doctors. They thought that, identifying malnutrition is easier, treating it is also easier. Why is it not happening? And that was a trigger for them to start the number of deaths that happened in villages like those. Once they started it, there were several challenges in commercializing it, taking it to that level. After our investment, few years later, we actually saw devices being used in hospitals in Palghar, where even the road was not paved. So they didn't sacrifice their financial discipline, but they were very intentional about the kind of places where their product will be used. That is where, again, Amul's core is that the dairy farmer, the dairy, owner who is providing milk, that farmer should benefit. If you look at any other, vegetable or fruits, whatever you and I pay as an end consumer, the farmer gets 20 to 30% of the price. Because of the Amul model, 60 to 70% goes to the dairy farmer. So social enterprises are very intentional about the end beneficiary, the target, the underserved, underprivileged segments of the society, and they do so without sacrificing on the business discipline and the commercial discipline. Delivering that impact is, I think, what differentiates regular enterprise from an impact enterprise. One very important point I would make is, if you look at several not-for-profits, NGOs, whether you look at organizations like Seva in Ahmedabad, Amul we have talked about, Arvind Eye Hospital we have talked about, there's a very strong mission that binds all the stakeholders. That mission is written in the charter. That mission is what attracts all the stakeholders together. But these days, many of the social enterprises, because of the return element, because of the business element, tend to be private enterprises. They don't always have a very crystal clear definition of their mission. It is not part of their constitution, governing documents, their charter. It is not part of their shareholder agreements. And that is where the alignment between stakeholders at times is not there. And wherever there is a push, wherever there is a possibility of a dilution, impact dilution, it happens. And that is why impact washing is emerging as one of the major concerns, but we will talk about it further, man. So over to you.
Okay. You also have suggested that measuring the impact is one of the defining element of definition of social enterprise and social impact investing. So can you give us through some example, an idea how real impact, real difference is measured?
Sure. So let's look at an example of education. Uh, all of us know that the type of jobs, the quality of jobs, the economy that we have has significantly, very rapidly evolved. And the jobs that we were used to earlier, the skills that were required earlier, now the skills required are very different. And by the time the students who are in fourth, fifth grade today, 10, 15 years later, the models will be very different. The jobs and skills requirement will be very different. So we need far better delivery of core concepts of mathematics, science, and English. So one of the companies that we have funded is a Baroda-based company, MathBuddy. It's called Concept Learning. The brand is MathBuddy. Uh, Now, when you start talking to the teachers, maths teachers, when you start talking to the just give me a second, man. I'm sorry for that interruption. So when you start talking to math teachers, when you start talking to principals, parents, especially first generation learners, if you go to low income schools, affordable private schools, government schools, the quality of teachers that you can attract for teaching mathematics is not always there at every place. Also, as time progresses, first generation learners, kinesthetic learners, they end up developing fear of mathematics, right? So how do you define impact? You can define impact by saying that just delivering good maths curriculum, delivering a different pedagogy, experiential learning models, personalized learning models, you've created impact. That is vague. If you define it further and if you get into efficacy of learning, then your measurement gets more scientific, but it is still not reaching the underserved communities. You are still just explaining, are you delivering better results than any other solution provider? But once you start defining and saying that at least 30%, 40% of my students are going to come from the underserved communities, they would either be, going to government schools where they're not paying anything, or certain categories. So affordable private schools is defined at somewhere around 18,000 rupees fee income. Any school which is below 18,000 rupees, you are largely catering to underserved, you are catering to many first generation learners. Once you start looking at vernacular medium state boards, then you get even more specific. So once you define your target beneficiary, once you define the result that you're going to deliver for them, the evidence that you are actually delivering that result, and consistency with which you do that, all of these are parts of measurement. Of course, there are standards around it. GIN has developed standard. There are IRIS standards. There are smart metrics that have been defined. So there are a lot of material. 2-3 years back, it did not exist, but because of this impact washing concern, impact fidelity concern, a lot of effort has gone in. And now for every sector, every type of company, there is a taxonomy which has been defined in IRIS about which metrics you should look at. One more important thing to do is any company that we invest in, we look at a theory of change. Like I'm explaining that if you move from Blackboard based learning to more experiential learning, to more blended learning, and if you look at the efficacy of that, you are likely to deliver better maths learning outcomes. That's a theory of change. Now around that, you will then define metrics. Then you will start collecting data on that, and you will see, are you really improving it, and what other triggers that you have, what other variable that you can really use, levers that you can use. And once you start taking core business decisions, once you start taking core strategic decisions around improving those metrics and results, then I think your impact measurement, your impact intentionality gets implemented. Back to you, Mike.
Yes. Now I would like to understand something more about impact investment management industry. Can you give us some idea about how big is the impact investment management industry? What are the kind of opportunities available for investment? What is the size of impact investment industry? How classification is applied for various opportunities to investment? What is the motivation of investors to put their money behind social enterprises? So if you can give us some idea, and is it possible to have social impact investment as a separate asset class altogether?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good question. Thanks for that, man. Uh, I think it is emerging as a separate asset class. It hasn't become a separate asset class as yet, but once your benchmarks start becoming very different from regular PE VC benchmark, once your return delivery, once your impact delivery, once your measurement, your standards around it, all of that develops as a very different practice. Once the type of investors, when an investor is looking at making an allocation decision and says that, okay, I'm going to be investing 10% of my total corpus into private equity and venture capital, and half of that will go to impact funds, those who are intentional about delivering impact, are measuring impact, and are reporting to me. Then once you get there, then I think you see it as a separate asset class. It has started happening in some cases. So many of the foundations, of course, there are large foundations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There are many others, Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, Lemelson Foundation, Omidyar Foundation, MacArthur, Rockefeller. So in US, you see lot more sophistication and maturity around this uh, in the foundations. And increasingly in India, I hear corporates talk about it. At least three of the investors in our very first fund were corporate investors who were intrigued by the potential to deliver impact while generating returns and wanted to see that model really develop. So I saw some of that happening, but it's not completely mainstream yet. It's not increased to a level where we can start calling it a separate asset class for sure. So I think the foundation is there, the movement in the direction has happened, but we are some way off.
Is there a framework of classification of opportunities adopted by the professionals in the industry for investment?
Sorry, I didn't get your question, man.
Is there any kind of a classification framework used in the industry for impact investment opportunities?
You're talking about LPs or the investors when they take decision, allocation decision, how do they classify between impact and non-impact?
Yes, I'm talking about the second part, what you said. When the fund is making a decision of classifying an opportunity.
Fund as an LP or a GP? So Mentera like fund or our investor?
Mentera-like funds.
Yeah. So first of all, we are an impact investor. So we wouldn't invest in a company unless the social impact is there. We also wouldn't invest if return target are not met. So both of these are required. So there are very clear criteria when we are investing in a company. We spend a lot of time understanding the impact orientation of the team, the business model. Does it lend itself to the impact delivery that we are looking at? Is there an evidence that impact will be delivered? So a lot of these criteria we look at during our diligence. Did I answer your question, Mike?
Yes, yes. And you have interacted with a lot of LPs also. If I take the question on the LP side, what motivates investors, your LPs, to offer their funds for social impact investment? What are their considerations? What
So
are
I
different types of investors have you interacted with?
so I think there's a very large segment of investors, definitely in US, increasingly in Europe and India also. In some parts of Asia as well, where I think a lot of the investors are beginning to see that the way we have been looking at returns, financial industry has always looked at maximizing wealth and return to shareholders, which has been looked at only purely in financial terms. It doesn't look at the damage that it does to the environment. It doesn't look at the inequality that it generates. And increasingly, even the beneficiaries of this system are starting to question it. Warren Buffett has been questioning it for last few years. Recently, he talked about gender inequality. He has talked about economic inequality. Bill Gates has committed large chunk of his money to that. So if you look at many of these foundations, these are entrepreneurs who have benefited from the system are questioning it, saying, you know, are the markets, leaving it to markets, are the markets efficient enough in delivering that equality or at least the opportunity for equality? So they're able to see it, and there is a very strong recognition that we need to think about our wealth allocation decision, about resources we allocate in the business. The way we build businesses has to be done very, very differently. uh, uh, and you know Generation of millennials, even people in their 50s 60s, everybody is beginning to question, and this pandemic is actually making people look at, like, 2 months. I mean, all of us are locked down sitting at home and thinking what is happening around us, right? So once you start looking at mortality that closely, every year the weather gets more extreme. What is happening with the climate once you start looking at it? So I think these questions are emerging from all corners, whether you look at academic, whether you look at industry, whether you look at thought leaders. It's coming from all corners. The biggest barrier today is this large segment of the investors still think that, if we start looking at impact, will we be able to generate enough returns? As we create evidence, as we deliver exits and create more success stories, and these are very difficult issues. Delivering healthcare to the most remote regions of the country, poorest parts of the country, equal access to education. These are very difficult problems that takes long time. Microfinance took almost 20-30 years. Amul is 50-60-year-old example. Arvind has taken long. But we can't always take 20-30 years. We can't always copy the mainstream model of investing. That is what you see. A lot of funds who intend to create impact or label themselves as impact have just copied the same mainstream model, which doesn't work. So at one level there is a concern about returns and the fiduciary duty. At the other level there is a concern about impact washing. So I think once we comprehensively demonstrate the return potential and also address the impact fidelity question, then at that point I see significantly larger chunk of capital moving in this direction. Definitely immediately after pandemic, we will see the money coming in. Indian government is increasingly worried about how much reliance we have on other countries, and number of things that need to happen in our country. You look at healthcare APIs. While we are leaders in pharma, we are reliant on China for APIs. You look at diagnostic kits, primers and probes, we're reliant on China. You look at ventilators, you look at devices, all of these, Korea, Taiwan, the number of equipments that come from there. So the government is also beginning to look at it. DFIs are pushing, focus on uh, uh, gender inequality, environmental inequality, social inequalities. So, so many triggers, Mayank.
Okay. What kind of opportunities exist in impact investment industry for CFA Institute members, candidates, for professional work careers?
Yeah, I think the opportunity for CF Institute members, charter holders, students is immense. It's a huge opportunity. Uh, the asset classes, a new asset class doesn't always happen that often. Private equity VC industries was created probably in 70s, right? In last 40-50 years, how many new asset classes were created? So one, there is a new asset class being created. Second, I talked about, while GIN is there, DFIs like CDC, IFC, number of them have created, many standards, but still there is a need for a professional body like CFA to offer courses, develop wider code and standards for practice, develop benchmarks, create capacity to support the impact activity. breaking into VC and a PE fund is often very difficult. It operates like a club. And unless you have certain academic credentials, or if you have certain linkage to that club, it's very difficult to join it. Impact investing offers an excellent opportunity to many members and students to actually do venture investing, do private equity investing, but with lot more purpose, lot more mission. Uh, but I would also caution people to not really react at it. Think about it at a lot more deeper level. Uh, Interested candidates will need to understand the impact space better. What are their personal triggers? Do they really care about it? Because on a daily basis, if you have to optimize between maximizing profits and maximizing social impact, your personal triggers are going to be put to test by entrepreneurs, by investors. So understanding the whole impact return continuum, finding better alignment with the aspirations and constraints that each individual has, I think is important. We listed openings at Mentera on CFA job site, and we received many applications, but there was very poor fit with the desired competencies and the aptitude that we were looking for. Not a single CV moved to the next stage, which was a bit disappointing for me, because I thought that the skills required are there, but I didn't see enough thought really being put in understanding the space before applying. Many friends, Mayank, you have been part of this group at CFA Gujarat chapter, has encouraged me over the years to develop an impact subgroup within the CFA society. So if there's an interest in the CFA India society, I'll be happy to participate and share our insight. As one of the oldest practitioners through Wilgrow for 20 years, we have been doing this. Also happy to talk through CFA Career Center and to young members of the fraternity about the opportunity that exists in this space.
You have been investing, selecting companies for investment. So what do you look for in a social enterprise while making an investment decision?
So I think one of the most important thing for the company that are pitching to any impact investors, and definitely to Mentera, is to do enough groundwork. There's a lot of application that I receive every day basis. Our website clearly says that we invest in 3 sectors, and if the impact is not there, we won't even look at it. But we get a lot of random emails even in those 3 sectors. The same deck that somebody would send to a mainstream investor gets sent to Mentera. So I think understanding the character of the impact investor is important. At Mentera, we have clearly defined our impact objectives and sectors, right? So most poor in our country poor people do not have sufficient access to health. More than 55 million are pushed into poverty due to out-of-pocket health expenses on an annual basis. So healthcare is both a symptom and cause for inequality. Nothing drives equality better than an equal access to a high quality, affordable education. Large part of our country is dependent on farming, and most of our farmers are smallholder farmers. They're dependent on weather. They have poor access to finance, markets, technology. They're not always able to adopt new technologies and farming practices. And we believe that big change in these sectors will come largely from disruptive innovation that use the best of science and technology. These are difficult problems that require a lot of patience and the best and the brightest mind to really come together. So in our teams and our investees, we're looking for that intellectual rigor. We are looking at longevity and innovation, will not sacrifice return for impact, will not compromise on impact either to make money. We need to optimize for both. In education, we need to focus on learning outcomes. In health, the disease profile in the country has very rapidly changed. If you look at 80s and 90s, more than 60% deaths happened because of communicable diseases. Now non-communicable diseases have taken over. It started from Kerala. The trend is now all over the country. Cardiology, cancer-related issues, diabetes is becoming a big killer. So these are some of the challenges. So we have defined for each of the sectors, like agriculture, we fund technology to improve agricultural productivity, promote sustainable agriculture that alleviates stress from climate change, improving income for small farmers. So anything that gets pitched to us has to go to that level of granularity. Healthcare, are we focused on the changing disease burden? Are we making it more affordable? Will that affordability sustain? Is important for us. Uh, because I talked about the complications, multi-dimensional nature of a lot of these problems, we need to make sure that we are funding diverse teams. Proven execution and financial discipline is important for us. Our ecosystems are still not mature. Uh, Many of the, if you look at the valley of death, the fatality for that valley of death is very, very high. So that is why the execution and financial discipline becomes very important. Very focused institution building through solid governance architecture. We prefer data and process based decision making over an individual centric business. So these are some of the themes that we cover, man.
Okay. If I take a related question from one of the participant, Jyoti Soni, she's asking, how is the valuation of the companies that you invest in or any social impact investment is considered, and what is the exit return multiple expected by the early investors?
Yeah. So as I said that there is a whole risk return trade off, risk return continuum here. There are below market return seeking investors. Then they go after maximizing impact, and they are okay with accepting muted returns. There are funds which still target market returns. At least in Mentira, we believe that we go early stage, we focus on innovation, we focus on the best in science and technology, and that is why we don't make trade-offs on returns. We believe that market returns are possible, 3x multiple, in some cases 5x multiple. The more disruptive the innovation, the higher the risk. That possibility is definitely there. How do we value the companies? So valuation doesn't change. The same valuation methodologies and metrics that you use for any business, the same valuation methodology you will use here. Of course, you will look at impact and the impact potential in addition to the financial returns.
And what are the kind of financial returns generated by the impact investment in the last few years, globally and in India? This is also a question by Navneet Ajmera, CFA member, society member.
Yeah, so I would really encourage you to look at a number of reports have happened. McKinsey has recently generated I think about 2 years back for Impact Investors Council, they did the report. And I think there is a survivor bias there whereby, only good return generating assets have been focused on, but they also mentioned that generating returns in education has been difficult. Microfinance, which is more mature, consistently the IRRs have been, comparable to commercial returns. More than 20% IRR, in some cases even exceeding 30% IRRs have happened in microfinance. But we haven't seen enough examples of that in education. Uh, Healthcare, we have seen that. Agriculture, in some cases, we have seen that. So I don't think we have demonstrated enough exits with enough market return potential in every sector, every subsector. But I think of all markets, India actually has the potential to do that because of the sophistication of the entrepreneurs, because of the advancement that we have seen in technology. We have seen the infrastructure around it, the whole startup community, the kind of talent that we see it. So I wouldn't be surprised if in next 4 or 5 years, in sectors like healthcare, education, agriculture, we see, you know, 5x multiple, even higher in some cases. IRRs which are comparable to any other startups. I wouldn't be surprised if we are able to do that. Definitely, Mentira is targeting that, and many of our companies have the potential to deliver that.
Healthcare is one of the focus area of Mentera and your expertise also. So what kind of business opportunities with social impact do you think will emerge from the present public healthcare crisis?
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting question. So, see, some trends take years to develop. At times, the whole ecosystem and value chain needs to really come together for the behavioral change required for new models to really be adopted. this lockdown is unprecedented in its length and breadth, and you know, it takes months for habits to form. 2 months. We are looking at least 2 months of lockdown. So it's a this crisis is very unprecedented, but the opportunity is equally large. We see significant shift in behavior of doctors who are more open to teleconsulting. If you had talked about teleconsulting patients earlier, wouldn't have wanted it. No matter how remote, they would take probably a day to go to the nearest city, but would want to see and touch a doctor. And doctor wouldn't really want to go to telemedicine. Schools and parents, except for some schools, in most schools, adoption of technology, virtual classes, unheard of. Now everybody is forced to look at that. Farmers would take their produce to mandis, and there was a lot of non-value adding intermediation. Now you see, most communities, most gated communities, there are farmers are probably just 1 degree removed. Any intermediate just 1 degree removed from farmers, which is happening. Recently, Madhya Pradesh government announced that anybody can procure anything from farmers directly at the farm gate. Earlier, regulatorily you couldn't do it. So many opportunities in each of these sectors. Indian government and policymakers are increasingly worried. We talked about reliance on China. Global supply chain is being relooked at. Manufacturing of PPEs for medical workers, indigenous diagnostic tests, medical devices, the priority of the government. We are seeing a lot of proactive initiatives. We had great R&D infrastructure created by likes of BIRAC, which is the Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council, funded by the government of India. And they're amazing partners. If you look at CCAMP, which is one of the best biotech incubators in the country, look at Venture Center in Pune, IKP, right? They created very good research infrastructure, but we didn't see enough translation. Now, Andhra Pradesh MedTech zone has been created in Vizag, and we are seeing the best-in-class manufacturing facility being implemented. Government is reaching out. There's a lot of support being provided in last few weeks, and I think the lessons that we are going to learn from this are going to hold us really good, even after the lockdown and restrictions open, and these opportunities will really stay longer. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, you suggested that a lot of operating models will change for agri, education, and healthcare businesses. But do you see change in the business model or the revenue model of these enterprises to change in coming times?
That's a very good question. So, if you look at the tech adoption, for most startups, cost of acquiring customers has been very high, and engaging customers and increasing usage hasn't been easy. Sustaining their interest beyond a few weeks has been even more difficult. Then comes monetization. Even when you achieve required number of users and engagement, our cost and quality conscious psyche makes monetization difficult, and churn is even high. So many business models in education, healthcare, agriculture, they will see better interest, traction, favorable margins, working capital cycles, but I'm concerned that very few will be able to sustain it. So all the enabling infrastructure in place, e-commerce, digital payments, improving artificial intelligence. But if you look at the user interface, it still remains very poor. Some of the education companies, you will see their advertisements on the television. They have raised a lot of money. Look at the user interface, it's very poor. You compare that to Disney, right? Or even look at, pre iPhone world and post iPhone world. Pre iPhone world, what did our phones look like? Now, whether you spend 8,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees, the kind of user interface all of us are used to, it's very different. Even 8,000 rupee, 10,000 rupee smartphone has to do significantly better than what it would have done. So I think interface remains very poor. Efficacy of many of these models or solutions is usually an afterthought. Is the child really learning? Parents are concerned about the screen time. So without significantly improving the interface efficacy, I'm concerned that monetization and retention will continue to remain difficult, and there will be few winners. I don't think that this will sustain for a very large segment of companies.
This is a very trying times for most of the businesses, specifically for startups. This is going to be a tough time. So, do you have any suggestion for the startups for the kind of capabilities that they need to build for sustaining and growing in the near future?
Yeah, so I think first of all, never let go of any good crisis. Never the
Waste
crisis.
a good
Yeah,
crisis.
never let it go waste. The bigger the crisis, the better you need to use it. So I think there's tremendous opportunity for innovation, and unfortunately, I think in last few years we got used to the way of building startups, growing companies. The model that was really being adopted was not capital efficient. Financial discipline was not there. Reporting and governance discipline was not there, and that's why, at least for next few quarters, capital is going to become scarce, and I think this is the time to fix all these gaps that we see. Also, the way startups were being built, that was not sustainable. The level of fatigue that you see, the kind of results that you see, the kind of fatality that you see, it wasn't working. It wasn't working for the promoters. It wasn't working for those who worked in those startups. It wasn't working for the investors. So a serious rethink is needed. And we shouldn't put all the burden only on the entrepreneurs and the startup world. I think as investors also, we were being a bit lazy. We were being passive. We were copying the model, mainstream model, which works for a mature, large ecosystem country like US. It doesn't work in country like India, and definitely doesn't work in some of the sectors which don't have the same level of sophistication, maturity. Uh, so I think lot of opportunity of disrupting the model, rethinking, lot of scope for original thinking rather than just copying what has worked somewhere else.
And if you look at the landscape and the size of social impact investing, how is it likely to change globally and in India?
You're asking about impact industry.
Yes, the impact investment industry, how landscape and the size, how is it likely to change globally and within India?
Yeah, I think you asked this question earlier also, and I don't think I answered it. So if you look at the how big is the industry to start with? I think there's a lot of hype around the startup, private equity, VC, impact, all of this. There's a lot of hype around it, but it's very small portion of the country and our economy. For a US dollar 2.5 trillion economy, I think funding for startups on an annual basis is probably around $10 billion. I don't think the industry, maybe few billions plus minus. I don't think it would be a magnitude of significantly different magnitude than this. So at $10 billion, it is 40 basis points of our economy. And more than 50% of these funds are invested in handful of unicorns. A large part of the balance is allocated towards mainstream startups operating in fintech, foodtech, e-commerce, app and digital economy. Bulk of real economy is left out. Now let's look at the impact industry. It's grown fast, but couple of years back, it was still $1 billion annual probably funds that were being raised, which is less than 4 basis points of GDP. It's literally a rounding error. And almost 80% of this got invested in microfinance, fintech, and energy companies, are core sectors of development which have the maximum bang for the buck when it comes to delivering equality, education, healthcare, agriculture. Each of them were smaller than 5% of even the rounding error. So I see the allocation for these sectors to significantly increase. It will be pushed by the government. It will be pushed by DFIs. It will be pushed by many of the foundations, many of the family offices, which are very targeted, which are very intentional about the type of impact that they want to deliver. So I see these sectors getting bigger. I see the whole impact industry getting bigger, and I actually see tremendous opportunity. It will grow. It will grow, but it will not grow in a passive, lazy way. The money is not going to come to funds who are just copying the approach that has worked in a different context. Funds which are thoughtful, funds which have learned their lessons and are bringing original models, are really solving problems in a in a more deliberate way to re-engineer their own DNA to deliver it are going to benefit.
Social enterprises are generally expected to generate profit also as well as achieve social goals. And many believe that these are conflicting objectives, conflicting interests. In your view, how are this resolved?
Yeah, I think that's to be honest with you, that's a challenge. That's not an easy thing to deal with, and that's why in my earlier comment I alluded to that if you want to become an impact investor, please make sure that you have serious personal triggers and you are seriously committed to it, because your commitment to impact will be tested on a regular basis by every stakeholder that you will engage with. I think there is no easy way to address it. Uh, you need to design your organization for managing this friction that is going to come. You need to define your impact very clearly. So, for example, in Menchira, we are three partners. Uh, my colleague Paul Bessel, I'm sure Mayank, you have interacted with him, you met him.
Yes.
He's worked 20 years in impact space. He started his career by saying, I want to bring change. He was inspired by work of Dr. Varghese Kurian and Amal, and he wanted to do that in many other sectors. And, we have board members, we have investment committee members like Vijay Mahajan, who's a doyen of microfinance, has done tremendous work in creating organizations like Pradhan. So there are people like this who are part of our decision making metrics, where even if any impact dilution was to happen, there will be a serious pushback that will come and it will be vetoed at the decision making level. So that's one level in the design of your organization you can do it. Second, in your investment committee, you need to make sure that the person with serious understanding of impact is involved in the decision making, not only at the final decision level, but throughout the investment process, you have that person involved. Third thing that you need to do is when you underwrite an investment, your shareholder agreements have to have sufficient safeguards against impact dilution. Fourth thing I again alluded to earlier in our conversation is that the charter of the organization that you're funding, the articles of association, the memorandum of the association, all of these need to factor in that impact objective. And your annual budgets, when the board discussions happen, you have to allocate resources towards delivering that impact. So I think there are many systematic ways of doing it, and the answer is not going to come from one significant move in that direction unless you structure your fund, unless you are organized for your team to deliver it. It's not going to happen.
Governments and many NGOs also work towards creating social impact, bringing social change. And now startups also have entered in this arena to bring change, impact. So how are startups competing or staking up against these organizations where their whole motive is philanthropy or getting funded by taxpayer?
So, it's not I actually don't see it as a competition. They really collaborate. So if you look at market models, see in philanthropy, in many cases you are giving a grant, you're giving a donation, uh, which can at times, I'm saying this with all humility and with all due respect to all philanthropic causes, at times can be disempowering to an individual. When you make somebody a beneficiary, a grantee, a person you are giving donation to, versus treating them as a customer. As a customer, if our objectives are not achieved, we will move away from that service provider. We will demand certain results. So treating them as customers is very empowering, and most poor people want to be treated like customers. They want to participate in markets. Education, when a choice is given to a person, anybody who's able to afford sending their child to a private school would do that. They're not seeking free education. Hospital, they're not seeking free healthcare. They want good quality healthcare to be delivered to them, but they want it to be affordable. So the innovation that social impact startups can bring is how to make it affordable, how to not dilute the quality, how to ensure that the cost is controlled, and it is I think quite empowering. It is sustainable, it is scalable, because in grants you have to constantly keep in a philanthropic world, you have to constantly keep raising grants. And there also, India is increasingly being seen as not a low income country, as a mid income country, as a lot more mature market. So the grant money that was earlier coming to India, to Indian philanthropic organization, has significantly reduced. Most of the DFIs, they have put India in a investment category, in an impact investing category, and not in a grant category. So that shift has also happened. So whether you uh, look at what the underserved population is seeking, more participation in market, what the fund flow is doing, the direction that we are taking, I think everything is in the direction of significantly scaling impact investing activity. We want to replace philanthropy. We want to be able to deliver education and healthcare to the poorest of the poor who can't even pay for it. Philanthropy will have a role. It will stay. Government will have a role. But all three of these, there will be a continuum. There will be a lot more collaboration. CSR will play a role. Over to you, Mike.
Ishwar Jindal, one of the participants, has a very interesting question. What are some common risks in impact investing, and are there any specific risk management tools, techniques used to reduce or manage the risk?
Yeah, so I think one is a impact washing, impact fidelity. We've consistently talked about it. Jin has defined it. You can look at it. That's the biggest risk, and there are very clear methods, very clear approaches designed to address for that impact fidelity risk. That is one. Second, I would say is like I talked about undercapitalization, the maturity of the segment, the maturity of the ecosystem is not there. So downstream funding is not always available. So even if an entrepreneur is doing really good work, uh, there is not enough early stage funding, and after early stage funding, there is not enough downstream funding. $5 million plus, there's a lot of money. Sub $5 million, there is not enough money. And there are very few funds, you can count them on your fingers, who really participate in early stage. So capital is an initial impediment, but efficient allocation of capital is a challenge. Third is, though the talent pool has really gotten better, uh, uh, I think it is still not at the same level as education business, or a healthcare enterprise, or an agriculture enterprise is still not seen at the same level as artificial intelligence, or a fintech, or going and working for one of the large IT or e-commerce companies, working with Swiggy or Zomato, right? So still not at the same level. So talent pool is emerging, but still there are challenges there. And I would say governance risk, I would say data based reporting, database decision making, which is not impact risk, which is a risk for most of these startups.
Mukesh, you seem to be a good reader, and any recommendation of books for our participants?
Yeah, so I mean it depends on the interest, because I've been reading very different type of topics. So for example, Bad Blood was a very good book. It actually talked about how many things went wrong in a company, and how many people did not really catch it up early enough, right? So it was poor diligence. It was basically taking something at the face value, whether you look at investors, whether you look at board members, so people who want to participate in investing. It's not a typical investing book, but it is an interesting book. Uh, Steve Schwarzman has written a book, What It Takes is an interesting book. Hard thing about hard things, anybody who's interested in startup world, all the challenges come in the startup world. Ben Horowitz has written this book. It's an interesting book. He's written one immediately after that, which is even more intense and deep. Interesting books. So I would also very highly recommend a book called Deep Work, Cal Newport's book.
Newport.
We are very distracted. The world is getting very distracted with increasing use of social media, and deep work is getting rarer and rarer. So I would really encourage definitely the younger members of the fraternity to read that book.
I would like to continue the conversation further, but because of the paucity of time, we have to end this thing here. I am grateful for to all the participants who have joined, and Mukesh, you specifically for sharing your time and expertise and giving us insight about opportunities and challenges for social impact startups. Thank you very much, Mukesh.
Thank you
I
very
also
much.
request all participants to give a quick feedback through the survey form.
Thank you, Mayank. I really enjoyed it. All of you have consistently pushed me to engage more. So this is my first formal engagement with CFA Society India. I'm happy to share experiences and contribute in whatever way I can. All the best to all of you, and let's hope that CFA Society India and our members become, more involved, and our participation increases in the impact space, and we make the impact space a lot better with the rigor that we have as an institute, code of conduct, ethics. We have a lot to offer to the industry. So let's hope.
Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again in similar space. Thank you again.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.